So, according to Gun Violence Archive, a nonprofit which tracks shootings, a total of 15,292 people were fatally shot in the United States in 2019, and that's excluding suicides. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Emmanuel Flores, and I'm here to talk to you about the topic of gun control. So, the discussion of gun control seems to come about quite often. The only thing is, not a lot of people are doing too many things about it. And the reason is because there's always the argument of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment states that a well regulated militia, uh, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of people to keep and bear arms for the purpose of self defense. And then followed by that is the 14th Amendment, which basically says that you have the right to possess a firearm for self defense. No changes are being made uh, to restrict gun laws the way we want them to, and that's why we are seeing mass shootings, that's why we're seeing police shootings, and that's why we are seeing suicides. Um, but history tends to keep repeating itself, and my job is to bring up the topic to expose it for what it is. So my question is, how many people have to die in order for us to have stricter gun laws? I've done multiple hours of research for this topic, and I've fired weapons also before. So first, I will go into explaining how firearms can cause death rates to rise. Second, I will express how easy it is to access guns. And third, I will address how to do it like Japan. And you'll see what I mean later. Finally, I will address the false interpretations of the right to self-defend versus the 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 right to have weapons of mass destructions. So first, I will start off by saying that firearms cause death rates to rise. According to Pew Researcher, a research center sharpening the U.S., says among Americans who own a gun, nearly two-thirds say they own more than one, including 29% who say they own 5% or more. So basically, anybody who does own more than one gun says they 29% of those people own more than one gun, which is quite unnecessary to have more than one gun. I think that a lot of people who misplace their guns can actually have more accidents happen and more tragedies happen, and it can result in more consequences for both parties. What I realized is that people who have more than one gun, I feel, are more scared, and that's why they feel they need more protection for no reason at all. More guns leads to more violence, and I hope you guys remember that. The more firearms there are, the more likely it is going to end up in the hands of somebody else. So, according to Pew Researcher, 40,000 Americans uh, who died of gun related injuries in 2017 marked a 19% increase from the 2012, which is actually the highest, was the highest until 2017. So basically, this happened because in 2012 people thought the world was ending, so the gun sales went up, just like how COVID-19 caused gun sales to rise. There was 2 million guns that were sold in the month of March. The same thing was happening in 2012. People thought there was more susceptible for chaos, and that's why they feel like they needed to defend themselves. And according to Amnesty International, a gun control movement of 7 million globally, they state that more than 500 people die every day from gun violence, and there were 1.4 million firearm related deaths globally between 2012 and 2016. In 2017 was the highest mortality rate, and by guns recorded. Before that was in 2012, when Americans, like I said, felt like they were, excuse me, felt like the world was ending. So one may ask, how is it that we can, how is it that people are able to access these weapons? Well, there's actually a breach in the system, and this causes easy access. So according to procon.org, the leading website for debate. In 1993, the Centers for Disease Control conducted a study, and basically it was titled "Gun Ownership as a Risk Factor in a Home." And basically, they found that keeping a gun at home increased the risk of a homicide. The NRA found out they were doing this, and they notched a victory when they passed a law called the Dickey Amendment, which basically deducted $2.6 billion dollars from the CDC's budget, the exact amount of the gun research program that restricted the CDC. So basically, this law made it so that we couldn't do more so the government couldn't do more gun research, and people were able to keep buying guns without any criticism from researchers. But for the as far as the current laws, there are these so-called background checks, which include people making calls to the FBI to see if people have any criminal background checks, and they exclude people who are mentally ill, who are immigrants, or who have had a dishonorable charge. And I'm actually sad to say that these people can actually still buy guns. According to Guns and America, Washington's NPR station states that there is a huge loophole in which private sellers are exempted from conducting the background check required of the dealers with the federal firearm license, which became known as the gun show loophole. Gun stores, whether a local mom and pop or a giant chain, must attain a federal license. So I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't make me feel safe. And it's pretty crazy how they have this gun show loophole so they can sell weapons to basically whoever they want, because they don't necessarily have to do a background check then and there. But ladies and gentlemen, do not be alarmed, because there is a solution to this, and it's called Do Like Japan Does. So gun laws are so strict in Japan, according to the Business Insider, New York's most credible business magazine. If Japanese people want to own a gun, they must attend an all-day class. They must pass a 95% shooting range test. They must do a mental health analysis, and then the government has to dig in their criminal records to see if they've done any crimes. Then they interview the family members, and then they are only allowed to buy either a shotgun or an air rifle, no handguns. And every 3 years, they must do the exam again. So Japanese people did not start by doing this. In 1946, American troops actually wanted them to have guns because they were in danger, supposedly. But in 1958, they caused a ban, and then a couple years later, they started reopening the guns and made it so people can have guns, but very, very limited. The regulations that Japan has for owning a gun is what made it so successful, and why I'm bringing it up today. Because if the U.S. could implement some of these policies, then maybe the gun homicide ratio would go down. So the reason I chose Japan is because even though it is smaller than the United States, it has the least amount of gun homicides. So what I did is I compared Japan to California, which is more or less the same size in diameter. California may have a bit more people, but it's more or less generally the same size. So according to KPPC, the Voice of Southern California, researchers at the University of California, Davis, published their finding in May issue of journal Malice Epidemiology after reviewing 50,921 firearm deaths recorded in California between 2000 and 2015. Gun deaths have fallen in California over a 16-year period. So there was 50,000 deaths in California from 2000 to 2015. And if we compare the same statistics to Japan, we'll see a huge difference. According to the University of Sydney, Australia's leading university in higher education, from 2003 to 2015, there have been 563 deaths in Japan. If I did my calculations right, that would be 47 deaths per year in Japan from firearms, compared to 3,333 deaths per year. So it is evident that the gun laws in Japan are actually doing something. but it is more effective than we can save lives. So if we implement these rules and if we implement some of the policies that Japan has, then maybe we can decrease this level of gun homicide that's happening today. So one would ask, how much would this cost? Well, Americans would save a potential $11 billion. According to Forbes magazine, a business magazine, states that guns stores had a revenue of about 11 billion. IBIS World said it in its 2018 report. With this amount of money being saved, America will also see less violence. Ultimately, taking guns will bring less homicides. And the biggest battle would be for the people who rely on the Second Amendment to saying that they need guns to defend themselves, but honestly, like I've repeated before, they do not need weapons of mass destruction to defend themselves. So it's just the interpreting of what is really defending themselves, and not needing these huge assault rifles and these and weapons that are not necessary for people to get a hand of, because then that's when the tragedies start happening. So it would be a very slow process, but the sooner the better. And a lot of people would not be happy with taking away guns because of the gun culture, but it's something that we'd have to implement slowly. So as we begin to bring things to a close, I want to summarize what we went over today. First, I explained how firearms can cause death rates to rise. Second, I expressed how easy it is to access guns. Third, I addressed how to do it like Japan. And finally, I addressed the interpretations of the Second and 14th Amendment, which need to be changed, which need to be interpreted differently to self-defense versus weapons of mass destruction. So I want to leave off just stating how this month was the last month of the 12 to 18, so 18-year span that we haven't had a school shooting in March. So this was from procon.org, that a significant portion of schools in the U.S. were temporarily closed in March in 2020 to prevent the spread of COVID-19. The month was the first March to pass without school shooting since 2002, the year most 2020 high school seniors were born. That's all I've got to say about that. Thank you very much. I hope you have learned something from my speech today about gun control. Thank you very much.